Hey guys, welcome back to the show. This is Daohe. Today I am trying something very different. I use AI to make a podcast for one of our articles. This article is about the legitimacy of power. So, as you may imagine, there are some quite complex ideas which are very hard for a non-native speaker like me to explain. And that's why I choose AI to deliver this content because AI is much better at explaining things clearly. I do hope that you will enjoy this format. So if you enjoy it, please hit like and subscribe. Your support means a lot for me. Now, without further ado, let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're attempting a pretty profound exercise, I think.
I'd agree with that.
We're going to try and look right through all the surface noise of politics, the day-to-day arguments, the headlines.
All the chatter.
All the chatter. And instead, we want to conduct a deep, really a foundational examination of the very architecture of human governance.
Bring right down to the studs.
Exactly. We're diving into what we argue is truly the ultimate question of power.
Which is?
Why do we consent to be governed? And maybe more importantly, what is it that validates that consent?
The central question.
It is. Our mission today is almost surgical. We're proposing to diagnose the fundamental pathology that can infect governance itself, how it can transform from a mechanism of service into something else, an apparatus of control.
Right.
And we have to begin with a core premise. This is what grounds this entire discussion.
Okay.
Civilization, fundamentally, is a grand social contract.
I'm with you so far.
And it's driven by one very simple, very concrete, and I would say universal desire.
And that is?
The pursuit of a dignified and flourishing life. Just that. The human desire for happiness, for growth, for autonomy. That's the non-negotiable cornerstone of any legitimate political structure.
That premise is everything. It has to be.
Yeah.
Because if that pursuit of happiness and flourishing is the foundation, well, then our first job is to draw a very bright line.
A line between what?
Between power that serves that goal and power that fundamentally betrays it. We have to understand that power is, it's a sharp, dangerous, double-edged sword.
Always.
When it functions as intended, when it supports public welfare, when it actively protects individual liberty and helps people grow, it gains what we would define as a kind of sacred legitimacy.
It's earned it.
It has. It's acting as the proper guardian of that civilizational contract we just talked about.
Okay, so that's the ideal.
That's the ideal, but the moment that power ceases to serve happiness, the second it becomes a structural obstacle.
A shackle.
A shackle. That's a perfect word. When it stifles free thought, when it suppresses essential freedoms of expression, of association, and actively hinders a citizen's ability to grow, it fundamentally breaches that contract.
The deal is off.
The deal is absolutely off. And at that point, it doesn't matter what its written laws say or how formal its procedures are or what kind of lofty patriotic rhetoric it uses. We have to be able to clinically, coldly diagnose it as an illegitimate government. It has forfeited its claim on the people.
That is a powerful diagnosis, and it feels like it moves us past the usual political squabbles and into a different realm entirely.
Philosophy, jurisprudence.
Exactly. So our goal here is to get back to those first principles of civilization and really understand what precisely is violated when the state, the supposed servant, actively gets in the way of that human pursuit of happiness. We're looking for the absolute boundary lines here.
The lines in the sand.
That's right.
So where do we start?
Let's start with how we measure a society. When we try to assess the quality of a civilization, we tend to look at very superficial things, right?
Skyscrapers, GDP, technological gadgets.
Exactly, the material wealth. But the sources we've been analyzing suggest that civilization isn't really measured by those things at all.
Oh, okay.
It's measured by one fundamental, unshakable standard. Whether the relationship between power and its original source, which is always the citizenry, is rooted in a profound and I'd say demonstrable justice.
Demonstrable. That's key. It can't be an abstract claim.
It has to be real.
Exactly. And so we have to define a legitimate government with a certain precision here.
Let's do it.
For us, it's one where power is authorized by the free will of the citizenry. Full stop.
And that can't just be something that happened 100 years ago.
No. absolutely not. This authorization can't be abstract or historical. It has to be constantly generated, through transparent procedures. And most critically, this power that's been authorized must remain subject to constant organized oversight by the very people it governs.
So it's a feedback loop.
It's a necessary feedback loop.
Yeah.
And if you have that, then the government, whatever its outward form, a republic, a constitutional monarchy, it doesn't matter. The government is the true embodiment of the social contract.
Because it's accountable to public reason?
It guards public reason because it's accountable to public reason. That's the core relationship.
Okay, so let's flip that coin. That's the healthy model. What about the pathology?
The illegitimate model.
Right. We argue that power descends into that realm of illegitimacy the moment it tries to bypass or ignore or just flatly contradict the popular will.
So instead of that continuous free authorization,
it relies on something else. Coercion, maybe? Institutionalized manipulation? Or it falls back on some archaic idea that power is just something you hold by, I don't know, divine right or brute force.
right, that it's an inheritance, not a temporary delegation.
Exactly. And we have to be clear, this is our clinical diagnosis. It's based on a kind of civilizational logic, not a personal grievance against any particular system.
What's so fascinating here, and I think this is what often confuses people, is that the violation an illegitimate government commits is rarely against its own written statutes.
That's a good point.
I mean, the statutes are often meticulously maintained. The paperwork is perfect.
So the crime isn't on their books.
No, the violation is far deeper. It violates the supreme law that we propose, transcends all written codes. And that is the principle of popular sovereignty.
Okay, so define that for us.
It's the non-negotiable idea that all political power originates in the people, all of it. Therefore, we declare that any rule, any regime that is not founded upon the continuous free consent of the governed is, by its very nature, an assault on human dignity.
A betrayal of the collective contract.
It is. It's a fundamental betrayal.
Okay, this is taking us into the really deep end of the pool. If popular sovereignty is the supreme concept, this, overarching idea, how does it actually manifest in the messy day-to-day reality of governing?
That's the right question.
We have to define the true essence of law itself in this context. And we would argue that law isn't just what the state dictates in its statutes. Law, true law, is the unconditional submission of power to a superior standard.
That's the paradigm shift right there.
How so?
Because law must restrain power, not facilitate it. And we propose that in any modern civilized society, the highest practical principle, the fundamental law that governs free, fair, and competitive elections, is the unshakable meta law.
The meta law. Okay, that sounds incredibly abstract. What does it practically mean? Are we suggesting this?
Yeah.
This meta law actually precedes the country's own constitution?
We are. Absolutely. The meta law is foundational. It comes before both the state and the Constitution, precisely because it defines the process by which the state and the Constitution gain their authority in the first place.
So it's the law that authorizes the lawmakers.
Perfectly put.
Yeah.
It is the most solemn political contract humanity has ever established for its own destiny. And think of it this way. A regime can meticulously follow its own constitution.
Right.
It can draft elaborate laws. It can hold impressive ceremonies. It can even win every single case in its own courts. But if that constitution and that legal framework were not genuinely and freely authorized by the people,
or if the process of consent is corrupted,
then the whole thing is just a sophisticated machine of control masked by the appearance of civilization. It's a mirage. It has not submitted to the meta law of genuine authorization.
So to bring this home for you listening, what we're saying is if the process for establishing power is fundamentally illegitimate, if the elections are rigged, let's say, or if the Constitution was imposed by force, then everything built on top of it.
No matter how legal it looks.
No matter how good the paperwork looks, it's all built on quicksand. The legal form is there, but the essence is completely invalid.
Precisely. If the rule setters get to write the rules that define their own legitimacy, the entire structure is functionally circular. It's a closed loop.
And therefore illegitimate.
The key distinction of a civilized society is that power delegates itself to the law. In an illegitimate society, power dictates the law.
Which is a terrifying thought. And that leads us right into the next piece of this puzzle.
The masquerade.
The masquerade of power. If the threat of illegitimate power were only, crude tyranny soldiers kicking down doors, suspending all law, the situation would be obvious.
It would be easy to see, easy to diagnose.
But we argue that the deepest terror of an illegitimate government today is not that crude violence. It's systematic, it's institutionalized deception.
We call this the masquerade of power.
Explain that.
This system isn't some ignorant throwback autocracy. It's highly sophisticated. It's fluent in the language of modern global politics, of democratic ideals. It knows all the right words.
This is where we really need to spend some time, I think, because the facade is often perfect.
It can be.
This kind of regime understands that in the 21st century, brute force alone is inefficient. It's messy. It gets you condemned internationally.
Bad for business.
Very bad for business. So it has to co-opt the symbols of legitimacy instead. It uses phrases like the rule of law, democracy, stability, order.
All the good words.
All the good words. And it uses them to construct what becomes this impregnable illusion of legality.
Right. And all the while, behind this polished facade, it's quietly and systematically eroding the actual substantive value of human liberty and autonomy.
A slow, methodical decay.
And this systemic inversion it's chilling, because it uses the very tools of civilization against its own population. We observe this inversion across 4 key operational institutions. It's a fundamental architectural lie.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one?
First, the Constitution. An illegitimate regime may promulgate a beautiful constitution, but that document is designed not to limit power, as true constitutionalism demands.
But to do the opposite.
Exactly. It's designed to ratify and entrench the existing power structures, giving them a formal legal blessing. The Constitution becomes a license for the regime, not a restraint on it.
Wow. Okay. And the second?
The second is elections, and this is the absolute heart of the masquerade.
The central performance.
The central performance. The regime may hold elections, and sometimes with very high reported turnout numbers.
Right. They'll boast about 99% participation.
Of course.
Yeah.
But we identify these immediately as choreographed rituals. The ballots represent nothing more than a mandated acclamation, a public show of unity and compliance. It's not a genuine choice between viable, independent alternatives.
It's a performance.
It's a performance for the international community, and it's a performance for domestic consumption. It just reinforces that illusion of consent.
Okay, so you have the Constitution and elections inverted. What's the third institution?
The third is the judiciary. The regime establishes courts. It has judges with robes and gavels. Everything looks right.
The whole theater of justice.
The whole theater. But justice is no longer an independent, impartial defense of the individual against the state. It becomes a technical extension of the regime's political or economic will.
So judges know the correct answer before the trial even starts.
In any sensitive case, absolutely. Appointments are politicized. The entire system loses its sacred independence. The law becomes predictable, but only if you know which side the power structure favors.
That's terrifying. Okay, and the fourth and final piece.
The media and the flow of information. They command a vast network of state and often commercial media.
Right.
Information is no longer a reflection of objective facts or a complex reality. It becomes a meticulously filtered, carefully shaped product, delivered by the hand of power to ensure specific behavioral and ideological outcomes among the population.
So when you invert all 4 of those institutions, the Constitution, elections, judiciary, media, what does that do to the role of law for the average citizen?
It undergoes a radical transformation. Law ceases to be the shield that protects your individual rights and your freedom of conscience.
Instead,
It becomes a finely sharpened sword, used for the legal punishment of thought and conscience. Dissent is pathologized as subverting order. Rational oversight is criminalized as a malicious attack.
the dictionary gets rewritten.
And we must emphasize, this goes so far beyond a classical, clumsy dictatorship. This is an efficient, silent machine, masked by technical rationality and the language of legality.
Why? Why go to all that trouble?
Because it doesn't need constant, expensive, and destabilizing bloodshed. It only needs to achieve one single strategic goal:
And what's that?
to convince the majority of citizens that the small crumbs of stability or safety or prosperity they possess constitute the absolute maximum entirety of freedom and happiness they are entitled to.
Wow.
They lower the ceiling of expectation so that compliance feels like a rational survival strategy,
Yeah.
not a moral compromise.
That structural deception convincing people that stability is the same thing as liberty, that leads us directly into this dangerous, sophisticated shift we've defined.
Yes.
The degeneration from the genuine rule of law, where law is supreme over everyone, to what we call rule by law.
Where power uses law as its personal tool.
We're going to explore that distinction in depth shortly. But first, I think we need to understand how the individual citizen is systematically broken down to the point where they accept this masquerade in the first place.
How the will is broken.
Exactly. That detailed look at the institutional deception brings us to the core issue. How does the collective will, the civic heart of a nation, actually break down under this kind of sustained pressure?
It doesn't happen overnight.
No. The civic will, that collective political desire of the people, it doesn't just vanish. We've identified a slow, profound, and internal process of erosion.
A kind of death by 1,000 cuts.
Yes, and we've diagnosed this as the triple death of the civic will. This is the process by which a citizenry is slowly, methodically exiled from political existence while remaining physically present within the state's borders.
It's a 3-stage process.
Yeah.
And it's targeted at different areas of public life very specifically.
Let's start with the first death.
The first death is discipline. Discipline via education. This initial mechanism targets the minds of the next generation. We observe that the educational system is fundamentally repurposed. It stops being a platform for genuine intellectual growth, for critical inquiry, for nurturing individual potential.
And it becomes what?
It becomes a controlled production line, and it's dedicated primarily to generating ideological loyalty and technical compliance. Its core objective is no longer to nurture citizens who are capable of independent thought.
But to mold what?
Obedient subjects.
That is a subtle but absolutely devastating shift.
It is. The curriculum is relentlessly indoctrinated with these grand, abstract, often unquestionable narratives.
Stories of state supremacy, national destiny.
The essential need for order. History is frequently rewritten or simplified to serve whatever the current power narrative is. But crucially, and this is the most important part, students are systematically discouraged, and often even penalized, for ever asking the foundational critical question.
Which is?
Where does state power legitimately originate, and who holds it accountable?
The one question you're not allowed to ask.
The one question that gets you into trouble. Inquiry, skepticism, rational critique, the very tools required for active citizenship, are marginalized. They're treated as dangerous or socially disruptive.
And in their place?
In their place, the virtues of unquestioning obedience, conformity, and a kind of perpetual gratitude to the ruling structure are elevated as the highest moral and civic virtues.
So the ideal student is the one who never asks why.
Only how to comply. And the result is a population that might be technically skilled, maybe even prosperous, but they're politically inert. They're incapable of rational self-governance because the muscle was never developed.
It's like building an exquisitely complex machine, but deliberately removing its ability to correct its own course. The human spirit, that part that questions, is just disciplined out of existence by the time they leave school.
That's the first death.
So what's the second?
Once you've dulled critical thinking in the classroom, you have to remodel the public sphere to maintain that state of compliance. This is the second death, the necessary anesthesia via public discourse.
Anesthesia,
Yeah.
numbing the public.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The public space, the media, social platforms, the entertainment industries is remodeled into a vast, noisy arena of pure distraction. And this is often achieved through a very subtle but immensely profitable collusion between the power structures and commercial interests.
You find that the critical edge of language, which is the tool we use to discuss fundamental political and social problems, is deliberately blunted.
How so?
Profound issues like structural injustice or the erosion of liberty, they get trivialized, they get fragmented, and they're immediately wrapped in this endless churn of outrage culture, low-stakes controversy, and partisan bickering.
So it's not that the truth is completely suppressed.
No, it's that it's drowned out, it's lost in the noise.
This process is essential because of the sheer volume and velocity of the input.
Mm-hmm.
The media fills our minds with constant, high-frequency sensory stimulation, celebrity gossip, trivial controversies.
Yeah.
It ensures a kind of saturation that prevents any deeper, sustained thought about serious matters. It's like mentally gorging on junk food.
Feel full.
You feel full, you've consumed massive amounts of information, but there was zero nutritional value there. Your mind is starved.
So when public reason dissolves in this constant, overwhelming noise,
Society effectively loses its immune system. That capacity for collective self-reflection and correction just withers away.
the public is left with no mental space, no time.
No linguistic tools and no capacity to just pause, step back, and contemplate the fundamental issues that are governing their fate. particularly the legitimacy of the power that rules them. They're too busy reacting to the next trivial distraction that's been put in front of them,
They become spectators to their own governance.
instead of active participants.
They know what happened today, but they have absolutely no capacity to understand why it matters or what the structural implication is for their own lives.
And that leads to the final blow.
The third death. And this one deals with the sacred act of governing itself, the election.
Forgery via political ritual.
Explain that.
Elections, which were originally conceived as the most solemn, authentic expression of the civic will, are alienated. They're turned into these grand, predictable performances designed only to confirm and reinforce a power structure that was already established long ago.
So it's not a real contest?
Not at all. In a legitimate system, candidates emerge organically from genuine competition, from local initiative, from popular mobilization.
Right.
In this illegitimate framework, candidates emerge instead from internal screening, from appointment, from designation by the ruling structure. The real contest, if you can even call it that, happens behind closed doors, long before the public is ever involved.
So by the time voting day arrives,
The act of voting is reduced. It goes from being an authentic exercise of free choice, where the outcome is genuinely uncertain, to a compulsory political duty. It's a mandated ritual of allegiance to the existing order.
the result is preordained.
The only variable is the size of the victory margin.
And this is the ghost in the machine.
It is. When participation is just an empty shell, completely devoid of any real choice or competitive alternatives, and when consent can be procedurally manufactured and recorded as statistical data,
The soul of democracy dies.
the soul dies. All that's left is the structural ghost of an election, the institutional form without the vital spirit of freedom and choice.
So after these three deaths, the death of inquiry and education, the death of reason and discourse, and the death of choice and ritual, the citizenry might still be breathing, but
They are politically exiled. They live in a country, but are no longer citizens of it in any meaningful sense.
that's a chilling progression. Having established that pathology, that triple death, we absolutely must now reestablish the remedy, the ultimate yardstick against which all power has to be measured.
The baseline.
The baseline. We propose that among all the principles that make civilization work, the law of free elections stands as the absolute, non-negotiable bedrock.
And we can distill its core spirit into what we would call a self-evident natural right, a truth that's universal to all rational people across time and across cultures. Which is, every rational individual possesses the sacred, non-transferable right to autonomously determine who shall govern them and the means by which they are governed.
Why do we call that a natural law? Why not just, a good policy preference?
Because it is the very definition of human political agency. It is the definitive ultimate source of all political legitimacy. I mean, think of any stable, successful, long-lasting civilization.
Okay.
You will find that power transitions and the authorization of leaders are accepted by the people because the process is accepted as legitimate.
Right. They trust the process.
Conversely, it doesn't matter how vast a nation's territory is, or how ancient its history, or how seamless its ideological narrative appears on the surface. If the generation and transfer of its power bypasses the authentic, free, equal, and continuous authorization of its citizens,
That power is illegitimate.
it exists in a fundamental, uncorrectable state of illegitimacy.
And if we allow power to self-legitimize, if the people in charge can just perpetuate their own authority without that continuous free authorization from the citizenry, then civilization suffers a profound structural regression.
A step backwards.
A huge step backwards. We propose that we move from a state of governance by consent to the passive, submissive state of mere being governed.
And the consequences of that are dire. The citizen is demoted. You go from being the master of the state, the sovereign authority that lends power, to being a managed appendage of the state machine.
And that strips away human reason and dignity and autonomy as core values.
Because those values are irrelevant to an appendage. You don't consult an appendage, you manage it.
This is the precise point where the rule of law collapses entirely, and something far more dangerous takes its place.
This brings us to the most insidious and frankly the most terrifying form of illegitimate government we've identified.
And it's not the simple brutal tyranny that just openly scoffs at all laws.
No, it's far more sophisticated. It's the system that masterfully uses the very name of the law to provide a professional, defensible legal framework for arbitrary power. This is the degeneration from the genuine rule of law into what we call rule by law.
That distinction is so vital. Let's really hammer it home in the genuine rule of law.
The law is above everyone, including the sovereign, the king, the president, everyone. The law is the referee who applies the rules that were agreed upon by the community.
But in rule by law.
The sovereign is above the law, or rather, the sovereign uses the law as their personalized tool.
It's like a referee who writes new rules during the game specifically to ensure one team loses.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And look at the mechanics of it. When a government successfully monopolizes all the powers legislation, making the laws, adjudication, interpreting the laws, enforcement, applying the laws, and political interpretation, defining the ideological meaning of the laws.
It creates a perfect, impenetrable, closed loop of power.
Exactly. There are no external checks, no independent forces, no higher appeal. And within that loop, the regime can define legality entirely at its whim.
That sounds absolutely suffocating.
Yeah.
Under a system like that, the essence of being legal is just completely distorted, isn't it?
It loses all connection to justice or popular will. It does.
So legal no longer means...
It no longer means aligned with natural justice or morality or the free will of the people.
Yeah.
It just means compliant with the specific regulation decreed by the current power structure, regardless of that regulation's moral content.
And this all happens under the guise of order and professionalism.
Which makes it so difficult for even well-meaning functionaries within the system to see the pathology. They're just following the law.
Can you give us some, conversational examples of how this legal inversion operates in practice? Because often these laws can sound pretty neutral on paper.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
We see this systematic inversion of civilizational values everywhere. Rule by law takes hold. The act of gathering and revealing factual truth, let's say publicizing verifiable data or demanding transparency about state actions, is suddenly defined by the regime, using its legislative monopoly, as leaking state secrets or spreading rumors.
So the focus shifts.
The legal focus shifts from the truth or falsehood of the revelation to the administrative act of revealing it without permission.
So telling the truth literally becomes a crime justified by a technical administrative procedure.
Precisely. Here's another example. Gathering peacefully in a public space to express grievances or demand basic self-evident rights, which is a core constitutional guarantee in any civilized state,
Right.
is redefined through carefully crafted legislation as picking quarrels and provoking trouble. The state weaponizes obscure public order laws, things originally meant for traffic control or noise reduction,
And applies them selectively.
and applies them selectively to turn a guaranteed constitutional right into a criminal offense through sheer legal maneuvering. Or consider critical opinions. Voices offering critical constructive opinions on policy or governance or institutional history are legally defined, not just politically criticized, but legally defined as subverting state power.
So criticism equals sedition.
The law equates them. And simply maintaining intellectual independence or refusing to participate in some state-mandated loyalty drive is immediately viewed and treated legally as a potential factor for social instability.
This constructs that self-looping, self-proving iron cage we talked about earlier.
It does.
Because these absurd actions, the arrests, the punishments, the censorship, they're all justified through formal legal procedures. The system can claim accurately that it's running on a legal track.
The arrest warrants are signed, the paperwork is meticulously filed, the trials are held in sterile courtrooms.
Yet every single action betrays that fundamental meta law of human liberty and consent. The form is legal, but the essence is pure tyranny.
And the tragedy of rule by law is that it forces citizens into a paradox. To be morally and civically right often means you have to be legally wrong.
The system demands you choose.
It demands that you choose between your conscience and compliance, and it uses the full force of the law to punish the former.
So where does that leave us? It sounds hopeless.
Well, we have to step back now and recognize a crucial, maybe even sobering historical fact.
Okay.
The evolution towards civilized, legitimate governance is not automatic. It is not an inevitable, self-correcting straight line that just happens regardless of human action. It relies profoundly, entirely, on the awakening and the ongoing responsibility of civic consciousness in every single generation.
It's a perpetual duty then, not a one-time achievement.
Never. We argue that a nation's true sovereignty doesn't reside in its military power or its treasury or its grand monuments.
It resides where?
In the clear minds and the independent wills of its citizens. The firmest, most enduring foundation for an illegitimate government is not its army or its censorship budget.
It's what?
It is the tacit consent of citizens who have simply grown weary and abandoned their inherent right to think, to question, and to choose.
So illegitimacy thrives in the silence.
It thrives when a society grows accustomed to never asking the fundamental question, did we truly choose them? Is this arrangement really serving us? When that question dies, the silence becomes operational consent.
So we have to talk about the awakening, but we're not talking about violent revolution here, are we?
No. We define the awakening not as a violent revolutionary upheaval, which is often chaotic, destructive, and frequently just leads to a new form of illegitimacy.
Right, trading one tyrant for another.
Exactly. Instead, we define the awakening as a profound, rational return to a kind of civic sobriety. And this requires 4 essential, deliberate, and nonviolent actions by the citizenry that restore the social contract from the bottom up.
Okay, let's list them. What's the first step?
The first step is to focus on reclaiming the power to define. We must immediately and consciously reject the language that has been distorted and weaponized by power.
So when the state defines critical oversight as sedition or transparency as leaking secrets,
We must refuse that definition. We have to insist on speaking about public affairs through the lens of common sense, moral conscience, and clear fact. We have to refuse to adopt the self-serving jargon that's designed to mask oppression.
okay, that's number 1. Reclaim language. What's 2?
Second, we need to be reconstructing the courage to oversee. The illegitimate system thrives on the atomized individual, the person who feels isolated, alone, and easily scared into submission.
So we have to break that isolation.
We must. This means building horizontal civic connections, forming robust social networks that are independent of state control, and collectively demanding transparency not as some favor to be granted, but as a fundamental, non-negotiable requirement for government to function.
Isolation is their weapon. Community is our defense.
That's it exactly.
What's the third action?
Third, we must be reaffirming the true meaning of elections. We have to insist in every conversation, every public forum, every institutional setting on the principle of free, authentic, and competitive elections.
And that means?
That means actively refusing to endorse, validate, or participate in hollow political rituals that serve only to manufacture false consent. If the outcome is predetermined, the ritual must be exposed for the forgery that it is, so that its political function fails.
Don't legitimize the sham.
Don't legitimize the sham.
And finally, the fourth action.
Finally, we must be reshaping the role of government. We have to restore the fundamental common sense and societal consensus that defines the structure of the contract.
Which is?
Government is the servant of the citizen, not the master. Every law, every policy, every institutional action must be tested against this master-servant relationship.
And the moment the government consistently acts like the master?
The social contract is voided, and the citizenry must collectively demand a reboot.
It's fascinating because every great renaissance, every civilizational reboot seems to begin with a question that's almost naive in its simplicity.
But it strikes directly at the core of legitimacy.
Where exactly does the power that rules us come from, and did we authorize it?
And when that question shifts from a private, fearful murmur in individual homes to the collective, undeniable inquiry of an entire society, that's when the powerful self-healing mechanism of civilization is activated.
And the foundation of a pathological system built entirely on that illusion of consent begins to crumble.
A power structure can manage complaints. It can manage protests. But it cannot manage the withdrawal of consent.
Okay. Let's quickly review the essential clinical insights we've established today.
Let's do it.
We've argued that the legitimacy of any government rests entirely non-negotiably on the continuous free consent of the governed.
Full stop.
This consent is formalized through the universal natural law of free elections, what we've been calling the meta law that governs all other laws.
Right. Any regime that systematically subverts the civic will, whether it's through the disciplinary methods of education, the anesthesia of public discourse, or the forgery of political ritual, it sacrifices that foundational contract.
And becomes an engine of illegitimacy no matter what its outward appearance is.
And we have to emphasize that the ultimate fate of any regime, I don't care about its economic achievements, its institutional sophistication, or its military prowess, is determined by what we call the tribunal of civilization.
The judgment of history.
The judgment of history.
Yeah.
And history, the impartial long-term judge, never bases its verdict on temporary stability or GDP growth. Its sole golden measure of legitimacy remains.
Does power originate from the people, or did it impose itself upon them?
That's the only question that matters in the long run.
So no sophisticated institutional design, no massive state apparatus operating under that rule-by-law principle, and certainly no dazzling economic statistic can mask the fundamental illegality at the core if authentic popular consent is absent.
The hypocrisy inherent in that masquerade of power will eventually be exposed. The gap between the legal form and the illegal essence just grows too wide to ignore.
And this tribunal, this ultimate court of appeal, it doesn't sit in some palace or parliament.
No. It is convened within the rational mind and the clear conscience of every single awakened citizen. When citizens stand tall through independent thought and rational inquiry, civilization gains the clarity it needs to rewrite its own laws.
And when citizens break the silence through collective, truthful speech, government may finally be compelled to reclaim its original sacred legitimacy as a servant of the people.
It's the only way.
So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought, and it's tied directly back to our diagnosis of the triple death of the civic will. If you look at the public conversation around you today, right now, what part of that process, the discipline via education, the anesthesia via discourse, or the forgery via political ritual, do you see most vividly reflected?
And perhaps more importantly,
Yes. Considering the 4 actions of the awakening we just proposed, what specific rational step can you, the individual citizen, take right now to reclaim your own power to define the terms of your own governance?
a question for all of us.
Think on that until next time.